The writers I admire most aren't the ones who finished every project they ever started. They're the ones who stayed true to themselves, who made space for growth, who are willing to say, that was a season and this is a new one, who kept asking, not just when will I be done, but what kind of writer am I becoming? If you're in that place right now, if that quiet nagging is getting louder, I want you to know it doesn't have to mean that something's gone wrong. It just means you're growing, and your writing life is big enough for that. Trust yourself, do the alignment work, and keep going. Welcome to The Whole Writer, a place where we talk about what it means to show up as someone who's grounded in their voice, in their community, and in their creative path, even when the world tells them to hustle, compare, or conform. I'm Nicole Meier, a multi-published author and book coach who believes that nurturing the person behind the page is just as important as refining the words on it. In each episode, we'll explore the terrain of writing life with honesty, warmth, and practical wisdom, creating space for you to write from a place of wholeness rather than depletion. Whether you're drafting your first manuscript or publishing your fifth book, you'll find conversation and companionship for the journey here. So settle in, bring your questions and your curiosity, and let's discover together what it means to write and live with authenticity and purpose. Hi, writers. Welcome back to a solo episode with me here on The Whole Writer. I'm so glad you're here with me today. I want to start by asking you something, and I want you to just sit with it for a minute before you answer. Is there a manuscript or maybe a story idea that you've been holding on to for a while now? Something you've poured your time and heart into, but that comes with this quiet, kind of low-grade feeling underneath it? Not quite dread, not quite excitement, more like nagging. A sense that something isn't right, but you're not sure if you should keep pushing through or if the universe is trying to tell you something different. If you've just nodded, even a little, then this episode is for you. Today, I want to talk about one of the harder, quieter decisions a writer can face, and that is knowing when it's time to switch it up. Whether that means setting a manuscript aside and starting something new, or reconsidering the publishing path you've been on. And more importantly, I want to talk about how to get there, not from a place of panic or defeat, but from a place of alignment. Because I think that word alignment is really at the center of this conversation. And it's something I come back to again and again, both here on the podcast and over on my Substack. So let's get into it today. All right, I'm going to share something personal. I want to take you back many years, back to when I was still pretty early in this journey as a novelist, still figuring out my voice, still feeling my way toward the kind of writer I wanted to be. I had a manuscript. I worked on it, revised it a little, and was excited about it. And I did a lot of what writers do when they feel like they've taken something as far as they can on their own. I sent it out. I queried agents. And here's where I got lucky. A literary agent actually responded with a detailed, thoughtful email about why the book wasn't working. It was firm, it was direct, but it was also incredibly kind. And I remember reading it feeling grateful, which is not the emotion you'd necessarily expect in that moment, right? But I was genuinely, deeply thankful. Because what she gave me wasn't just feedback on that manuscript. She gave me a lens, a new way of seeing what I'd written. And when I looked through that lens, I realized something that I think had been true for a while, even if I hadn't let myself fully see it. That manuscript was not the book I was meant to come out with as my debut. It just wasn't. I was still learning my voice. I was still figuring out what I was actually trying to say, what kind of stories I wanted to tell, what kind of novelist I wanted to be. And I wasn't there yet. And that book reflected that. So I made a decision. Quietly, without drama, I put that manuscript in a drawer. And I turned towards something new, a story that genuinely held me, that felt aligned with the kind of author I was becoming. One who writes character-driven, feel-good stories that explore the bonds of family and friendship and community. That's me. That's my lane. That's who I am as a storyteller. And that first practice manuscript, I was not living in that lane yet. I hadn't found it yet. Putting it down wasn't giving up. It was the most honest creative decision I could have made. Now, 4 published books later, I can look back and be so glad that that practice novel wasn't my debut out into the world. All right, maybe at this point, some of you are listening and can relate. So let's talk about that feeling, that slow, nagging sense that something isn't working. I think a lot of writers misread it. They interpret it as weakness or inconsistency. They tell themselves, everyone feels this way. Every writer wants to quit sometimes. And that's true. Or they might say, this is just resistance. I need to push through. And that can be true sometimes too. Resistance is real. The middle of a draft is hard. Revision is hard. There are seasons of every project where you just have to put your head down and do the work, even when it doesn't feel good. But, there's a difference between that kind of resistance, the productive friction of creative work, and something else, something more persistent. A feeling that isn't just, this is hard, but rather, this isn't right. The question worth asking yourself is, what is this feeling actually about? Is it fear? Is it boredom with the work? Is it that you're in a difficult chapter and you want to escape? Is it urgency to keep up with author friends around you? Those are all hopefully passing things. You can work through those. Or is it something more foundational? Is it that the story itself doesn't reflect who you are as a writer anymore? Is it that you started this project as one version of yourself and you've grown, and now there's a mismatch between where you are and what you're working on? Is it that every time you sit down to write, there's another story pulling at you? One that feels more alive, more urgent, more you? Those are definitely signals, and they're different signals. And they all deserve to be honored, not suppressed. Okay, I also want to speak directly to a group of writers who I know are listening right now, because this conversation lands differently with you. You're not just sitting with a manuscript that feels misaligned, you're deep in the query trenches. Maybe you've been querying literary agents for this book for a year, 2 years, longer. You've gotten rejections, maybe a lot of them. Maybe you've gotten some encouraging feedback mixed in, a few requests that didn't pan out, and you're in that exhausting in-between place of not knowing whether to keep going or to quietly close that chapter. First, I see you. That is a specific and particular kind of hard, and it doesn't get talked about enough. Here's what I want to offer you. Querying a book for a long time doesn't automatically mean the book is wrong or that you should move on, but it does mean the question deserves to be asked honestly, not from a place of defeat, but from a place of clarity. Ask yourself, has the feedback across all those rejections pointed to something consistent? Not just, oh, it's not right for me. That's subjective and it's part of the process, but something more substantive. Something about the concept, the market, the execution. If there's a pattern in what the agents are or aren't telling you, that pattern is data. It's worth absorbing. Also worth asking, has the publishing landscape shifted around this book? Sometimes a manuscript that was right for a particular moment hits the market at the wrong time. And that's genuinely nobody's fault. The book isn't broken, the timing just wasn't there. And if that's the case, it might be worth thinking about whether there's another path. Maybe a small press, hybrid, self-publishing, something else that better fits where this book lives. But here's the thing I really want to emphasize. There is no shame in deciding that you've given the book everything you had, that it taught you what it needed to teach you, and that it's time to take everything you've learned and pour it into something new. That's not quitting. That's a writer making a wise, aligned decision about where to invest their creative energy. The question is never, did I fail this book? The question is always, What does my writing life need right now? I want to talk about alignment a bit more because I think it's one of those words that can sound a little vague if we're not careful. So let me be specific with what I mean. When I talk about alignment in your writing life, I'm talking about the relationship between three things: the kind of stories you're meant to tell, the audience you want to reach, and the kind of author you want to be in the world. When those three things are in sync, when your manuscript is living inside that intersection, the work has a different quality to it. It still has hard days, it's still challenging, but there's an underlying sense of rightness, a feeling that you're in the place doing the right thing at the right time. When they're out of sync, even a well-crafted manuscript can sometimes feel hollow. And no amount of pushing will fix that, because the problem isn't your work ethic, it's alignment. And this is what I want to be really clear about. The decision to step away from a project or change direction should never, never be driven by desperation. I've been there. Oh my gosh, it's not pretty. I also sadly see too many writers who are hungry to, quote, make it. They're so fixated on reaching some external milestone, getting an agent, getting a book deal, getting on a list, that they start making decisions from that place. They pivot not because someone or something new is calling to them, but because they think a different kind of book will be more commercially viable, or because they're afraid of their current project and it won't sell, or because they want to speed up a timeline that isn't moving as fast as they hoped. And like I've mentioned, I have been there. I get it. The publishing world can feel urgent. It can feel competitive. It can feel like there's a window that's closing and you need to get through it. But when you let desperation drive the bus, you usually end up somewhere you didn't mean to go. You end up writing a book that doesn't feel like yours. You end up chasing a version of success that doesn't actually fit your vision. And that creates its own kind of misery. The pivot I'm talking about today looks completely different. It's not frantic. It's not reactive. It's quiet and intentional and rooted in self-knowledge. So, how do you actually know? How do you distinguish between this is just hard and this is genuinely not the right path? I've come up with some questions for you to ask yourself, and I invite you to sit with them. All right, the first question: when you imagine finishing this book, how do you feel? Question number 2: does this story reflect who you are as a writer right now? Question number 3: is there another story pulling at you? Question 4: have you gotten consistent outside feedback pointing to something fundamental? And finally, question 5: what does your gut say when you're not in fear? I'll repeat those again. When you imagine finishing your book, how do you feel? Does the story reflect who you are right now? Is there another story pulling you? Have you gotten consistent feedback pointing to something? And finally, what does your gut say? Okay, so let's say you've sat with those questions, something shifted inside you. You have a clearer sense that it might really be time to change direction. What do you actually do? Here are some thoughts. I would say first, give yourself permission to grieve it. This part matters. You worked on this project. You believed in it. Maybe you love it. Don't rush past this. You don't have to be fine about it immediately. Give yourself a few days. Just be in that feeling. And then I would suggest don't delete anything. Put the manuscript in a drawer, literally or digitally. Save everything. Because nothing you write is wasted. The voice you found in that manuscript, the scenes at work, the characters that came alive, they might come back again. It's an archive of all you've worked on. And then another thought is get clear on your authorial identity before you dive into something new. This is the alignment work. Before you start chasing the next shiny story idea, spend some time with those questions. What kind of stories am I genuinely called to tell? What themes keep returning to my work? Who's my reader? What do I want them to feel? Write it down, make it concrete, because this becomes your compass. This is what will help you evaluate not just your story idea, but your publishing path, your platform, all of it. And then I would let new things emerge. And when you do move forward, let alignment, not urgency, lead. This new project should feel like a yes for all of those things I mentioned. Don't rush into something that doesn't really fit just because you want to be in motion. Writers, I want to leave you with this. Switching it up, whether that means setting a manuscript aside or reconsidering your publishing path, is not the same as giving up. When it comes from the right place, it's actually one of the most courageous and honest things you can do for your creative life. The writers I admire most aren't the ones who finished every project they ever started. They're the ones who stayed true to themselves, who made space for growth, who are willing to say, that was a season and this is a new one, who kept asking, not just when will I be done, but what kind of writer am I becoming? If you're in that place right now, if that quiet nagging is getting louder, I want you to know it doesn't have to mean that something's gone wrong. It just means you're growing, and your writing life is big enough for that. Trust yourself, do the alignment work, and keep going. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. If this episode brought something up for you, I'd love to hear about it. Come find me over on Substack. That's where I'm living these days. All right, everyone. I'll see you next time on The Whole Writer. If you want to check out my coaching programs for fiction writers, visit NicoleMeier.com. That's MEIER. And if you like this episode, I'd love you to take a minute to leave a rating and review for this podcast. This will help more writers like you to discover the show and to get going on their writing journey. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, happy writing, everyone.